This one should make everybody very angry. Everybody. Patriots, welcome back to the channel. I am Jared, and this is Guns and Gadgets, the premier source for Second Amendment news, constitutional updates, and stories that the mainstream media will never touch. Today, we're going to dive into a shocking federal lawsuit out of New Jersey that exposes one of the most brazen Second Amendment violations I've seen in a very long time. It's a case where a completely law-abiding man who did absolutely nothing wrong had his firearms confiscated by some oath breakers simply because his wife was briefly admitted to a hospital for evaluation after a language barrier misunderstanding. Let that sink in. The government took his guns because of somebody else's medical situation, not his. And now the state wants to make that confiscation permanent. So, Second Amendment Foundation is sticking up for him, and they're suing the Fort Lee Police Department, the chief of the Fort Lee Police, the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, and the Bergen County Prosecutor himself. This is the case of Elsid Aliaj, sorry if I'm butchering the name, versus the Fort Lee Police Department and the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office, filed in federal court today, November 3rd, 2025. Grab your coffee, Patriots, because we're breaking down every piece of this one because this case could set national precedent. And this case exposes the Gestapo, the wannabe kings, for what they are. No King's Day. Woo! Well, the kings are actually the local government's wannabes. Before we dive in, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video. It's Checkmate Mags. Whether it's for competition or defense, Checkmate has been making reliable American-made magazines for over 4 decades. With their expertise in high-quality manufacturing and a never-satisfied approach to innovation and refinement, Checkmate is the leading provider of high-quality aftermarket and OEM Freedom C loaders for many makes and models. Each Checkmate mag is 100% developed and manufactured here in the United States of America and is backed by a lifetime factory warranty to ensure superior performance, reliability, quality, fit and finish, and they're just great. They just work. A big thank you to Checkmate for being a sponsor of this channel, and guys and gals, support a company that supports our rights. Let's get into how this all happened here. Elsid, it's E-L-S-I-D, Elsid Aliaj, A-L-I-A-J. He's a 38-year-old New Jersey resident, a law-abiding citizen, no criminal record at all, and legally owns his firearms. On April 17th of 2025, back in the spring, his wife, referred to as L.A. in the complaint, was 7 weeks pregnant and went to a medical clinic in Englewood, New Jersey. And because of a language barrier, clinic staff mistakenly thought that she was expressing suicidal thoughts. The clinic called the police, and the Englewood Police Department had her involuntarily admitted to the New Bridge Medical Center for evaluation. But within a couple of days, she was cleared. It's a 72-hour hold, no suicide attempt, no threats, no ongoing danger, and she was discharged with a diagnosis of adjustment disorder with depressed mood. Don't even know what that means. But in plain English, it was a misunderstanding. She wasn't a threat to herself or anyone else, but that didn't matter. That same night, officers from the Fort Lee Police Department showed up at Aliaj's house at 9:30 p.m. They had no warrant, they had no court order, and yet they demanded that he surrender his firearms. Not because of anything he did, but because his wife had been taken to the hospital for evaluation after some person at the clinic misunderstood what she was saying. Now, fearing arrest, Aliaj he complied. And then they took everything. They took his Smith & Wesson M&P 15 rifle. They took 2 Springfield Armory handguns, several magazines, boxes of ammo. They even took accessories like optics, all without any warrant. They stole this man's lawfully owned items. Days later, his wife was home, fine, and medically cleared. But when Aliaj asked for his firearms back, the Fort Lee Police and the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office told him, "Too bad, pal." They said they weren't going to be returned. Instead, they said he had 4 options, Before I tell you these four options, I bet you can tell me what they are from the Constitution. Remember, let's go back and do a little bit of history. The Second Amendment, right, says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. What? Say it with me. Shall not be infringed. So, you must know the four options that the kings of New Jersey gave him. 1. Store your guns off-site. 2. Sell them. 3. Destroy them. Or 4. Request a hearing, which they told him wouldn't happen until September or later. Well, that sounds like it's constitutional. He had committed no crime. He wasn't disqualified from owning guns. He wasn't under any investigation, but his property, his constitutionally protected property, was stolen and being held hostage by some oath breakers. So Aliaj, trying to follow the law, found a statute called NJSA 2A:62A-16.1E Echo, the so-called duty to warn law. Now, this law literally says that if firearms are seized because of someone else's mental health issue and those guns belong to a different law-abiding person, the guns must be immediately returned once that person certifies that the patient has no access to them. So he did exactly that. On June 23rd, 2025, he wrote the prosecutor's office explaining that his wife had no access to the safe, it was locked, biometrically secured, and only he had the combination. So he requested his guns back by law. And you know what? You know what the wannabe kings did? They ignored him. Instead of returning his property, a Bergen County assistant prosecutor, David Aguirre, who apparently thinks he's a king, told him the office isn't even going to consider giving him his firearms back unless he handed over his wife's medical records. Think about that. The government wanted private medical documents, not his. They weren't even his to give, but they told him, give us your spouse's records as a condition for getting your guns back. And when his attorney asked what legal authority allowed that, the prosecutor admitted there wasn't any, just that the state had some concerns. In other words, the crown demanded information or the peasant could not have his property. Concerns? That's not law, that's authoritarianism. And when Aliaj refused to give up his wife's private records, which he had every right to withhold because they weren't even his, the prosecutor's office retaliated. The kings pushed back. On September 12, 2025, they launched a revocation proceeding to permanently strip him of his firearms purchaser identification card, the equivalent of revoking his right to own firearms in New Jersey. Get a load of these clowns. The state is literally trying to revoke his Second Amendment rights because of concerns about his wife, despite her being medically cleared and him never posing any threat. This is what the lawsuit calls imputed mental disability, punishing one spouse because of another's alleged condition. And the complaint states it bluntly. This is not the law. Full stop. Now let's talk about what this means under law. Well, first off, how many times has New Jersey's cops gotten away with this bullshit? How many times have they stripped people of their rights because they feel like they have a concern? Like our constitutional rights have any, like, it doesn't matter what you guys are concerned with. You're our freaking employees. Just so, how many times have they gotten away with it before this man was asking for help and Second Amendment Foundation stepped up to the challenge? Now, Elijah's lawsuit is built on the Second and the 14th Amendments, and it's filed under 42 U.S.C. 1983, which allows citizens to sue government actors for violating their constitutional rights. And there's no limit to what you can be rewarded. You can sue for all the money, all the marbles. Now, his argument is very simple. The government seizes firearms without a warrant. They refuse to return them even after the supposed reason disappeared. And now they're trying to permanently strip his right to keep and bear arms, all without due process, all without lawful cause. How very, very oath-following of them. The Supreme Court made it crystal clear the right to keep and bear arms belongs to the individual. It's not contingent on what the government feels. It's not subject to some bureaucratic clown's concerns. Now, the text and history test from Bruin requires that the government must prove that any firearm restriction is consistent with our nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. And there is no historical tradition that says a law-abiding person loses their guns because of something their spouse allegedly said or did. None. Doesn't matter what she said. It doesn't matter. Now, this is as far from tradition as one can get. This case is not just about one man's guns. It's about whether the government can use association as a weapon to take away our rights. If they can say your spouse has a problem, so we're taking your guns, what's next? Your roommate made a comment online. Your son saw a therapist. Someone at this address was investigated before. Your neighbors saw you eating Taco Bell. The implications are chilling. And this is a collective punishment, something completely foreign to the Constitution and to American liberty. If this kind of abuse stands, every gun owner in New Jersey and potentially across the country could be at risk of losing their rights because of the actions or medical records of someone else. That's why this case matters. It's another example of why states like New Jersey and the bureaucrats running them continue to trample the Bill of Rights under the guise of safety. The lawsuit demands several things. An injunction ordering the government to immediately return his firearms, a court order stopping them from moving forward with their revocation attempt, and a declaration that their actions violated the Second and 14th Amendment rights, as well as attorney's fees and costs under federal civil rights law, which means he could get paid pretty good. Now, he's also asking the court to declare 3 New Jersey statutes unconstitutional as applied, the ones the prosecutor's office cited to justify their actions, including vague public health and safety provisions that have no basis under Bruin. Patriots, this case is the perfect example of what happens when local government overreach collides with Second Amendment ignorance. And these people, these cops and prosecutors, are some ignorant SOBs. A man who followed every rule, followed every law, went through every legal process, and even offered to secure his firearms in a safe was treated like a criminal because of a misunderstanding involving someone else. That is not America. That's not liberty, and it's certainly not constitutional. If the courts do the right thing, this case could set a powerful precedent that stops bureaucrats from weaponizing mental health concerns against law-abiding gun owners. But as we've seen before, these fights take time, and they take people who are willing to stand up. I know them all personally, but I want to thank everybody at Second Amendment Foundation for having the gall, the backbone, the intestinal fortitude, the balls to stand up for this man. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Guys, before we wrap up, a quick thank you to today's sponsor, Blackout Coffee, founded by patriots who love this country and stand for the Second Amendment. If you're tired of woke coffee companies, make the switch today. Use code GNG10 to save 10% off your order each and every single time you do it. If you found today's video helpful, hit that thumbs up, share it far and wide, and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, because this is where the truth about our rights will always be front and center. Stay vigilant, patriots, and remember, the fight for freedom never ends. Appreciate y'all. God bless you. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.